Thank you for the meals. Thank you most of all for your prayers. And we just so appreciate this church the last few months and everything we've been going through. Okay, so you can go ahead. So when you wake up in ICU, the first thing that pops in your head is what the heck happened? And what happened was on January 18th, Tammy and I went to the gym, which we did a lot. We had a hard workout, but it wasn't anything that we hadn't done before. We went to the grocery store, then we went home and ate dinner, and I stood up from the dinner table and the room just started spinning. And I laid down on the couch. I told Tammy I needed to get to the hospital. She said, should I call an ambulance? And I said, no, do not call an ambulance, because I was just thinking about how expensive an ambulance would be. And little did I realize the medical bills we were getting ready to get. At that point, we thought, well, maybe I just ate some bad ranch. Maybe it was just the ranch dressing. So she helped me get to the car. I was stumbling. We got to the car. She drove me to the hospital. She couldn't go in because of COVID. I went to the hospital. They looked at me and they put me in the waiting room for 2 hours. So I sat in the waiting room for 2 hours. Then they finally admitted me. And we have pieced together what happened through follow-up discussions with our doctors, but I don't have a lot of memory of that first night beyond being in the waiting room. So then what happened is I had a dissection in a vein in the back of my neck. And a dissection is where your vein, the wall of your vein splits a little bit. Blood starts going into the wall of your vein, and then that builds up, and when blood stops moving, it builds up, and then it basically closed off the wall of my vein. And that caused a stroke in my cerebellum. And so you can see in the MRI here, that dark tissue is basically dead tissue. So I basically lost the left side of my cerebellum. I'm fortunate it didn't go into my cerebral cortex. And a lot of stroke victims, where they have paralysis on one side of their body, it's because the stroke went into their cerebral cortex. So it didn't impact my cognitive function, but it impacted these things here. Loss of balance, numbness and paralysis on the left side of my face. I lost sensation on the right side of my body. I lost some motor control of my hands. It's hard for me to shuffle a deck of cards now, but I still can use my hands. I lost my swallow functions, so I had to be put on a liquid diet for 2 months. My left vocal cord was impacted, which is why my voice sounds like this. I'm running on one vocal cord. And what I didn't realize, which we know now, is your vocal cords seal up, and that maintains air pressure and allows you to cough and sneeze, and it allows you to speak for long periods of time. So my vocal cords don't do that. So which is why I have to take breaths when I'm talking. And then it also impacts digestion. And it's amazing what your vocal cords do, which we did not realize, but we know now. And then my digestive system shut down, which is partially because of the stroke. It's also because I was in ICU for 6 weeks, fully sedated and just laying there on a liquid diet. And so my digestive system has a lot of problems that we're still dealing with today. But those are some of the things I dealt with. And we're thankful because it could have been a lot worse. So I was in ICU, and Tammy couldn't come in. No one could come into the hospital. So this is a picture of Tammy, my kids, and my mother and father-in-law in the parking lot of the hospital, praying for me. And at this point, all of you were praying for me. Our old churches that I'd never set foot in, were praying for me from the pulpit. And I'm just so thankful for that. Brian wanted me to tell you the next couple of slides are PG. They're pictures of me recovering in the hospital. So the kids, just for kids here, I just want to warn you that they're PG slides. So this is me in ICU, recovering from my brain surgery. And again, all of you were praying for me while I was here recovering. And if you go to the next slide, this is these are the scars in the back of my head from the brain surgery. They had to drain the spinal fluid that built up, and they had to remove part of my skull and to relieve the swelling. So if you go to the next slide, after my brain surgery, they moved me out of the ICU to a floor in the hospital, and it was a COVID floor. And I remember waking up and the nurse explaining I was on the COVID floor, and I said, if you were sick, would you want to be on the COVID floor of the hospital? And he said, well, we didn't have any other beds. We had to put you on the COVID floor, but don't worry, we've got negative air pressure in all these rooms. So the negative air pressure doesn't let the air get out. And I thought about that, and 2 days later, I tested positive for COVID. So that negative air pressure is a bunch of malarkey. So, but I was thankful. I'd already had COVID earlier in the year. So we don't think my COVID case this round was as severe. And then after that, if you go to the next slide, I was recovering on the COVID floor at the hospital. At this point, I was on a ventilator. I had a trach in. As you can see, the trach tube. And my lungs were filling up with fluid. I'd gotten pneumonia. And so my lungs would fill up with fluid. They would come in and suction it out, and it would just fill up again. So I had COVID, I had pneumonia, and then I had gotten a staph infection. I had an infection in my blood. And so one night I was laying there, and I just got real hot. I felt my face get real hot. The nurses came in. I had a temperature. My temperature spiked up, and they couldn't get my temperature down. The nurses called the doctors in, which I rarely saw the doctors. So the nurses and the doctors were running around frantically trying to get my temperature down. And I had so many things going on, COVID, pneumonia, a staph infection. They just weren't sure what was causing it. And so I had all this fluid in my lungs. I felt like I was drowning. And I thought, well, this is it. I'm gonna die here in the hospital by myself. And I wanted to reach out to someone. I didn't want to put this on to Tammy. She'd already been through so much with my surgery. So I sent this picture to my brother and my sister-in-law. I just wanted to connect with someone and tell them goodbye. And so I sent this picture, and after I looked at it, instead of telling them goodbye, I texted them, Wilson. And so some of y'all get that, right? That was from the movie Castaway. I thought I looked like Tom Hanks. And so I said Wilson instead of telling them goodbye. We laughed about how I looked like Tom Hanks in Castaway. And they sent me back and they said, that's a crazy beard. So later that night, I still had all this fluid in my lungs. I was burning up. And I just thought about my kids. And I just asked God to please let me live. I knew that my kids would be okay. They're strong, and they would have been fine if I wasn't there. And I know that we'll be together for eternity. But I just ask God to let me be with my kids in His creation. Let me spend more time with them in creation. And at some point that night, my lungs, they drained out my lungs, and my lungs didn't fill up with fluid again. And at some point my fever went down, and I woke up the next morning, I was still alive. And so God answered my prayer. I called my brother, and the first thing my brother said is, we've got to get you to the Shepherd Center. The Shepherd Center is a facility. It's the best place in the country for brain injury and spinal cord. And it just happens to be here in Atlanta. And while I was in the hospital going through all these things, Tammy and my brother and my cousin were working on figuring out how they get me into the Shepherd Center. And so the hospital we were in said, don't bother applying. Nobody gets into the Shepherd Center. She said, and the administrator of the hospital said in her career, she's only seen one person get in, and that was someone whose family had donated a lot of money. So people wait for 2 years to get into the Shepherd Center. I was able to get in 2 weeks, and it was a miracle that was facilitated through my cousin and her husband, Jay Stevens and John Stevens. And they had known the Shepherd family for years. And my cousin's business did pro bono work for the hospital. And they reached out to people that they knew in the Shepherd family. And in 2 weeks, I was admitted to the Shepherd Center. Tammy was able to go there. The Shepherd Center allowed a spouse to go in with you. She was tested for COVID, admitted to the Shepherd Center, and then like me, she would not be able to get out. So we were both locked into the Shepherd Center for my entire stay there. So then, if you go to the next slide, we got to the Shepherd Center, and I noticed the doctors there were using the word hopefully. And I realized this was not a broken arm. It wasn't something they could confidently say, we're going to set your arm in a cast and it's going to heal and you're going to be able to use your arm again. They used the word hopefully because they didn't know. They didn't know how much I was going to heal. They said, hopefully you'll be able to walk again. Maybe you'll use a cane. Hopefully the sensation will come back. Hopefully you'll be able to swallow food again. But they just didn't know. And it occurred to me, what is my hope in? What is your hope in at that point? What are you hoping? And I knew that my hope was in Jesus and the God of the Bible. And that I had hope in all of you and all of your prayers. And I knew that Tammy had put all these Bible verses up on my mirror. And I would read those Bible verses every day, and that's what I have my hope in. So when you get to the hospital, you get to these different levels of comfort. And at my kids' school, they talk about comfort zones. And they say there's no growth in a comfort zone, and there's not a lot of comfort in a growth zone. And that was really true in the hospital. I had this hospital bed that was so comfortable. I could get that bed adjusted into the lounge position, and I was super comfortable in that bed. And the therapist there would say, that bed will take everything that you give it. I could lay in that bed all day long and watch TV and be super comfortable. And Tammy would get me up out of that bed. She would get me into a wheelchair. And it's this wheelchair, it's got memory foam, it's super comfortable. I could sit in this wheelchair all day long. And those therapists would get me out of that wheelchair. And their main goal was to get me walking every day. You can see the pictures of the therapist getting me out of the wheelchair, getting me into a harness. And then, if you go to the next slide, I'm in a harness and I'm in a robotic walker. And they would get me walking again. Then I moved from a robotic walker to a treadmill. And I eventually got to the gym. And they worked with me every day. And rehab is really just about doing a lot of things you can't do over and over again. The very first day we got there, my therapist, Johnny, said, stand up. I said, I can't stand up. He said, well, let's see what you can do. And they would work with me every day and have me do things I didn't think I could do. So we couldn't have the kids there. They couldn't come into the hospital. And this is my beautiful daughters coming to visit me through the fence outside of the hospital. And I was so thankful to see them. And there were a lot of things we had to be thankful for. And we would think about that. We had a church service. And we were thankful to be locked in there. Because like you said, with COVID, we couldn't reach out to our neighbors. We couldn't go see friends and family. We couldn't go to work. But here in this hospital, we were locked in there with people that we could talk to. And we met people with serious injuries, a lot more severe than mine. And we meet people that you would expect to meet in the hospital. We met a guy who fell out of a tree stand, broke his neck. We met a boy on a motorcycle, had a motorcycle accident. He's 21 years old. Was thrown from the motorcycle, got run over by a car, broke his spine. And then we met people with injuries that, didn't involve riding on a motorcycle. We met a boy who was swimming in the ocean and went under and lost blood to his brain. There was a boy who went out in the ocean and dove into a wave. The wave pushed him down into the sandbar, and he broke his spine. We met a young girl who had just gotten married. She got out of a car to go help someone on the side of the road. She was hit by another car and had a brain injury. We met a pastor of a church in Tennessee who took his kids mountain biking. He went over the handlebars on his mountain bike and broke his spine. And we would meet all these people and we would think about what we have to be thankful for in this hospital. Thankful that we're alive. Thankful that we could still see our families, even if it was through a fence or on Zoom. Thankful that we were in a place where we were healing and getting better, and we had therapists to take care of us. And just thankful for God's provision in our lives. All the things God had done for me to survive up to that point. Thankful that Tammy could be with me. And things that we couldn't even imagine that 30 years ago, Tammy had worked in a rehab hospital just like this one. And the things God had done to prepare for her for this really difficult cup that we were given. And so we had a lot to be thankful for. And we could all write pages of things that we're thankful for. But even in this hospital and all the things we were going through, we were thankful. This was a picture the kids had done. It was up on the wall of the hospital. And Tammy had put all these pictures around it. And I would look at it every day and think about all the things I had to be thankful for and all the things that God had done for us in our lives. And Brian, you can't see, but up at the very top, there's a picture of me holding a trout. And that was a trout trip we went on just a week before my injury. And I was was so thankful to have gone on that. I don't know if I'll ever be able to do that again. I could hardly stand up in that stream with waders on before my stroke. I don't think I'm gonna be able to do that again. I'm so thankful we went on that trip. And for all the younger dads here, the one thing that occurred to me, there were no pictures of me working in the basement on some shelving, or working in the yard, or working late. These are all things that my mom said. My mom says things where we're making memories. And so the next time you have a decision to make about what to do on a weekend, you think about what you're doing to make memories with your kids, with your spouse, with your friends, with your family. And these are the things that I would think about when I was in the hospital. And then you go to the next slide. It was a tough place to be in the hospital. We were surrounded by people that had these severe injuries. I was on a liquid diet. I couldn't eat food for 2 months. I had all these digestive issues. But all the other people in the hospital were struggling. We had a patient next to us that would moan and cry. And we would just lay there and listen to them. And I would just think, God, I just want to be anyplace else. Just get me out of this place. You know, put me back in the rehab, or put me back in the hospital up at the North Point Cherokee Hospital, where I could lay in a room and I couldn't hear the other patients. I couldn't interact with them. I was just in a room by myself. I said, God, put me back in ICU, where I was sedated, and I was just out of it. I couldn't think about what was happening to me. I just wanted to be any place else, and not in that hospital. And Tammy was with me, and she was in the same place as me, and she heard all these patients, and she would be out in the hallway with quadriplegics that didn't have the use of their legs or arms, and they would steer their wheelchair with a straw. She was out in the hallways with them. She was out in the hallway with moms and dads of children who had suffered spinal cord injuries, and she would be out there praying with them, and they would seek her out. She would help me get out of bed every morning. She would help me get a shower. And she never left. We were there for over 40 days, stuck in that hospital. She didn't leave. Even when I snapped at her in anger, I told her I didn't need her help anymore, that the nurses could take care of me. She never left. When I thanked her for staying with me, she just said I wouldn't be anyplace else. She wouldn't be anyplace else. And she stayed there with me. I'm just so thankful for her. Thankful that God put her in her life in all these years that we've had together. Thankful for every moment we had in that hospital together. Thankful that we got to play cards together every night. And I'll just cherish every moment that I get to spend with her, however long that is. So this is on the counter of our home. These are all the medications I'm on. When I went into the hospital, I was taking an allergy pill every day. By the time I left ICU, I was on 20 medications. And you can't see here, but there's a hammer with a red handle. Tammy has to crush these medications up and mix them in water and give them to me through a feeding tube. As I said, she has to get me out of bed in the morning. She has to get me dressed. She has to give me a shower. So we've got a long road ahead of us. I can't do anything without her. I can't so much as help to go to the mailbox. And she's got all this on her. So I want to just ask you to pray for her. Pray that she'll be able to take really good care of me. She does take really good care of me. Let's pray for her to give her strength, because we've got a long road. It's been 3 months, and we have a long ways to go. So please continue to pray for us, and just pray specifically for Tammy and for her strength. And then this is my answer in prayer. This is me at home. I get to hug my kids, hug my beautiful daughters. If you go to the next slide. My son came home from Colorado.